Welcome to season 2 of Remembering Muizenberg series, part 1 of 4. I thank our two speakers, Peter Stern and Harry Sachs, who will tell us very different discussions and memories, etc. This is all to bring in the celebrations of the centenary of the Muizenberg Shul, which is going to be celebrated at the end of this year, over an 8-day period from December the 28th till the 4th of January. We'll be having lots of events almost every day. And I will be sending more of those events. Maybe next speech we'll have an exact itinerary to share with everybody. And I encourage everybody who is in South Africa as well as overseas to come and do what we're doing now, but live in person. Obviously, it's a long way away from people overseas. So we'll love you all the same for whatever you choose, but you're of course cordially invited. On that note, I'm going to go over to Peter Stern, who's going to be our first speaker. And after that, we'll maybe go to a few minutes of questions, and then we'll go directly to Harry, who will be our next speaker, and also end up with some questions. I'm going to spotlight you, Peter, for everybody. And thank you again, Peter. You are in Israel, so you're only 1 hour ahead. And always nice to hear someone from Israel in particular. So thanks for being here, and please tell us what you'd like to speak about, etc. The floor's yours.
Okay, so to start with, I've lived twice in the United States, once in a little town called Zelienople, which nobody's ever heard of, and also in New York, and also in California. And when I was studying, I lived in the United Kingdom in London. And I came to Israel in 1972, where I was here from 72 to 75. And then I left to go to America. That's when I went to New York. And then I came back in 2009. I did come back because I had children here. But I came back in 2009 and met my current wife. My previous wife died. Some of you may know her. Her name was Maureen Beryl from Rondebosch. And so I remarried Brenda Solomon, and we live in Ra'anana, and we have between us 18 grandchildren. So that keeps us, as you can imagine, very busy. So much has been written and spoken about Muizenberg over the years, from Sea Pointers, the Joburgers, people overseas, all sorts of people who came to visit because of the surf and the sand and the sun. And they also were interested. There was a big argument about whether you call it the Snake Park or the Snake Pit. We took a vote because the Joburgers called it the Snake Pit and the Muizenberg boys called it the Snake Park. Anyway, they had, it was inaugurated in Cape Town. It was called Memoirs of Muizenberg. It was a display of photographs, and that was done a long time ago. I believe it was also at the Labia house along the beach, along the main road. And they asked me to do the talk here in Israel, which I did about Muizenberg. It was done at Beit Protea, which is an old age home not far from where we're living in Ra'anana, in Herzliya. And my twin brother, Richard, who's watching, the photograph exhibition was sent to Toronto, and he did the talking about Muizenberg there. We had Asher Shapiro, who was an old friend of mine who lived near the Flay in Muizenberg. He did the report and the lecture on Muizenberg. He lives in Australia. My friend Leonard, who's also been on this show, he did it in London. And so there was so much written and spoken about that it's very difficult to know what I could talk about because I've already done the talking. And then, of course, there was Hetty Davis's wonderful book on the story of the Shettle by the Sea. And that has all sorts of information in it too, the hotels and life and pictures and everything. So it was difficult to choose a subject. So I chose a subject which is on a very personal level. I decided to talk about service to the community. And it's personal in as much as I will deal with my father, my mother, and my grandfather, and maybe intersperse it with my sister and my brother. But this is not to disparage in any way the service that thousands of people did over the years in Muizenberg, but I chose to focus in on a personal level. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Rabbi, Ryan, for the honor to talk on Zoom preceding the 100th anniversary of the Muizenberg Shul. I think it's quite amazing that the Shul, considering what has happened in South Africa with the exodus of Jewish people all over the world, quite a few to Israel, to America, to Canada, to Australia, all over the world. It's a feather in his cap that he's managed to resuscitate the Muizenberg Shul. So kol hakavod to you. So thank you once again for the honor of talking. So where best to start? I think I'll start with my father, who was an amazing guy in that he just loved community service, and he spent, which is I think a world record, 60 years of service to the shul. He sat in the box, he was a life president, and he got a cup, which I think you might like to see. I don't know if it's going to come up. There it is. There's the cup he was awarded, and one of my favorite belongings is the cup that was presented to my father, and on it it says, presented to Bertie Stern for 60 years of wonderful service to Muizenberg Hebrew congregation. My memory of the shul is my brother and I had a bar mitzvah when we shared the bar mitzvah on the bima of Muizenberg Shul. He did it in Hebrew and I did it in phonetic English, because I used to miss my lessons rather to go to the beach. And he was much more diligent. So I stood on a box because he was taller than me, and I did it in phonetic English. He did it in Hebrew. And for my sins, I now live in Israel and I battle with the Hebrew. So what can I tell you? I followed in my father's footsteps to a certain extent. He was a real role model to all of us. And so I joined shul committees all over the world. I was on the shul committee of Rondebosch Shul, where my father-in-law, Lulu Beryl, was the president, as was my father in Muizenberg many times. In fact, my father was a life president of Muizenberg Synagogue. I also served on the shul committee of Appleton, which is in Wisconsin. That was interesting because it was my first American committee, and they asked me to be the ritual expert on this committee. Well, I didn't know very much about rituals, so when I used to say, let me think about it, and when I come to the next meeting, I'll let you know. And when I got home, I'd ask my wife, because she knew all about it, and then I would come back the following week to the committee, and they probably thought I was pretty smart. Then I served on a committee in Little Neck in New York, which is on Long Island. And that was the sort of extent of my service to synagogues. The other thing my father developed was he was a scoutmaster. He was a commissioner of scouting in the Cape, and he started the 2nd Muizenberg Jewish Troop. Now, the 2nd Muizenberg Jewish Troop was the only troop in South Africa that actually had the words Jewish in brackets on the epaulette on the side of the sleeve. 6th Green and Sea Point also had a lot of Jewish, but they didn't put Jewish on the actual sleeve. So we were unique, and the actual troop won the Gordon Shield, which is a competition of all the scout troops in the Cape area. They won it 6 times in a row, which was quite an amazing record. This was just before I joined the troop. It sounds like it went downhill from then, but it didn't. I was a assistant scoutmaster, once again following in the footsteps of my father, but again not to the same extreme. And a lot of my scouts have already spoken on this Zoom, like, for example, Henry Brown, Gerald Septel, Lenny Weinreich. These were guys who weren't that much younger than me, but it's amazing how much 2 or 3 years difference makes when it comes to doing stuff, okay? So the other thing my father, following the trend of service to the community, my father was a city councillor from 1973 to 1992. And he was very involved in the city council, mainly for the South Peninsula area. And I think one of the things my brother said on a previous meeting, my father didn't like the idea of a water slide blocking their view from their house on Beach Road. So he, at his own cost, persuaded the city council to move the water slide to the parking lot area on the other side of, or near the Flay, near the outlet of the Flay. And he paid for a park for kids, which was known as the Bertie Stern Park. And one of their pleasures was to sit on their balcony at the house on the corner, which you saw the picture of, watching the kids playing in the park. It was quite something. Now, he also, being a joiner and being community-minded, was...
My dad's in there as well. My dad's there. So they've all been talking.
Sorry, can I just ask whoever's talking, please mute yourself.
There's Dad.
Shall I continue?
Don't talk about anything.
Yeah, I think you should. 1 second. Let me just see who's talking. Okay, go for it. Please continue, Peter.
Okay. Being a joiner and being community-minded, he was also the chairman of the youth hostels of South Africa, and used to go to international meetings on behalf of South Africa. He was a staunch member of the Board of Deputies in the Cape, and he was very busy as well with the orchestra. He was on the committee of the Cape Town Orchestra. He also, he and my brother Robert, who was a chairman of the Cape Chamber of Commerce, following in on community service, they used to be on the board. As I said, my father and Robert were on the board of the the city orchestra, on the committee. So that was some of the things he did. He also, because of his age and because of his zest for life, he decided to go back to university, and he did a couple of degrees there. And I think the last one was when he was 85 years old. And so that was an amazing record of a man who just wanted to serve the community. The major thing that he developed was in 1959. He bought a derelict building near the railroad I've forgotten the name of the station. Anyway, it doesn't matter. On the main road, just as you come into Muizenberg. False Bay. Thank you.
Thank you.
He developed the Mask Theatre, which had been a restaurant. It had been a bowling alley, and he saw the potential of this because it had a ramp, which meant that the seating could be used productively for a theatre, and the pin setting at the back could be used as a dressing room behind the proscenium. And so I joined him at the time when I was courting my first wife, and we did lots of helping backstage. And what I would like to show, if you can, Ryan, was a couple of pictures which I fished out of that's the house in Muizenberg. That's for my parents' wedding. Pictures 2 and 3, if that'll help you.
Okay, so pictures 2 and 3. Okay, let me see if I can find them.
You got them. You have
Let's
them.
start off. Here's the house.
That's the house, yes.
And which one is the picture that?
That's
is it. This one? Okay.
Yeah. Now that picture was taken in De Waal Park in Cape Town, because it was from the South Peninsula Dramatic Society originally, and then the Mask Theatre. They call them the Pearly Kings and Queens. And if you look at the picture closely, you can see me second from the right, and fourth from the right is my father. And then the next one next to my father is Lillian Jamison, who performed in the very first play. On the far left is Millie Goot, who lived in Arlington Court, and Ted Jamison next to her. And on the right is Susan, who she and I performed with Norman Wisdom in Stellenbosch. We used to go around the country a little bit, backwards and forwards, singing songs, Pearly King and Queens, like "You Got a Bunch of Coconuts" and "I Made You Love You." I didn't want to do it. Anyway, that was the one picture that I thought I'd show you. And the other one is the very first show at the Mask. No, that's not it. No, that's it.
That's
the very first
yes.
show in Muizenberg at the Mask Theatre was called Sorry Wrong Number. Again, coincidentally, I'm on the right and my father's in the middle. And to the left of my father is a rabbi from Jerusalem now, a guy called Moshe Shirkin, whose parents owned the Balmoral, his uncle owned the Balmoral Hotel. And in the middle between Ted and my father is Lillian Jamison, who played the part of a woman in distress. It was the Sorry Wrong Number, it was a thriller. And my part in the show was to coordinate the phone calls. I didn't appear on the stage, but I was busy pressing buttons backstage. That was the start of my illustrious career in theatre. Okay, so my father left a trust, and the trust of which my brother Richard is a trustee for the Mask Theatre, with conditions that they do at least 6 performances a year, which they're doing a lot more. And it's going very well. And if they didn't do it, the theatre would have to be sold and the money given to the university, I believe, for some sort of a bursary for a theatre student. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen, despite the fact that they went through this corona epidemic and through financial troubles and a fire and all sorts of things. The theatre survives, and it's sort of a memorial, a living memorial to my dad, to our dad. So that's what I have to say about the mosque. In 1939, when my twin and I were 2 years old, my father went off to war. And I believe he came back in 1944, but I didn't know him. And we only learnt about his war record and his service once again to the community or to the country. And so that was an interesting thing to do. Our days in Muizenberg were, as Muizenberg boys, we went to the beach, we went to the shul, we went, and in fact, in the shul, one of the things that was really nice was at Simchat Torah, they gave us huge pieces of chocolate, the Cadbury chocolate, a huge slab. I don't know if they do that anymore, but
We do it.
yes, you do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing, my memory of Muizenberg Shul from that point of view, when we were kids, was there was a bowling green opposite. And we watched these old guys, which I am now, and we all are, walking behind these woods with little yellow dusters and white pants, talking to these bowls. And that's when I decided never to play bowls. So when my father came back, it was just prior to the establishment of the State of Israel. And so he had a lot of experience in the army. He was up north at El Alamein. And so he was one of many people who had military experience, who trained a lot of Habonim boys to fight in the War of Independence. It was done clandestinely on a farm in Klapmuts, and I walk around Muizenberg sometimes and people will come up to me and say, "Are you Bertie Stern's son?" They used to call him Sandpiper. And that was another thing that my father was involved in. So as you can see, he was extremely involved. Habonim came to Muizenberg, but it didn't come to Muizenberg because my father decided that as we were the second Muizenberg Jewish, he didn't want the conflict between Habonim and the second Muizenberg Jewish. As a result of which, I never went to Habonim, except very briefly once in Grahamstown. And so Habonim did not take place in Muizenberg, but there were many other Jewish youth movements there. Now I'll come to my mother. My mother was also a provider of services to Muizenberg. And I'm going to read a letter or a tribute that my sister wrote when my mother was buried in the Muizenberg Shul on the flats there on Prince George Drive. And I'll read it aloud. She takes, with her family tradition of public service and leadership as Alkala and scouting, her Star Wars war effort at the side of her mother, work with the German immigrants, and her many years in the Hebrew nursery schools. She touched and influenced the lives of hundreds of children and their parents. As she used to put it, half the Jewish geniuses of Cape Town passed through my hands. And of course, she served in her unfailing support of Dad in his many roles. I thought that was a nice tribute. She she was an amazing lady, and I believe she was the power behind the throne. But I can't say that because my dad might have got upset. The other thing my mother did was she was what I call a pack rat. A pack rat is a person who collects things. Anyway, over the years, my mother collected everything that was written, including my father's war records, including our reports from the slope show or from school or from wherever, and the things that went on at the mosques, all the different activities that went on in Muizenberg and around the world, in fact. And when she was ill, she asked my sister Jean to destroy the papers. And my sister Jean decided the papers were too important. It was a history of a Jewish family growing up in South Africa and all the things that they did and served. So that record, she told my mother, if you want to destroy it, you tear it up, and she didn't. After my mom died, my sister consulted with my brothers, and she decided with us to deposit these papers in the Kaplan Library at the university. So these papers exist, and they divided into an A and a B. The A is the public can read them. The B has to wait until all my mother's children are no longer around. I'm not sure of the year, but I think it's coming up not so far forward, which is a bit discouraging. Anyway, one of the things that I'd like to tell you about, because my mother was quite a powerful figure. My mother decided, her father was the founder of Woolworths, and she decided, when they decided to offer credit cards, to apply for a credit card. Anyway, she sent her application in, and my brother Robert was a director of Woolworths. And the person in charge of credit cards came to see my brother and said, hey, you know, we've got a problem with your mother. So the answer from my brother will tell me what the problem is. Well, they said she filled out the form, but under the heading where you've got to give your income, she said it's none of your bloody business. So my brother said, well, what's the minimum you can give her? I think they gave her 100 Rand credit, and she didn't really want the credit card because she grew up in a cash time of the world. And so she just put it in the drawer, but that I thought was a pretty cute story. The other story, which I like about her, was she was walking along the pavilion one day. She met the rabbi, and the rabbi said to her, hello, Mrs. Stern, how are you? She said, I'm fine. He says, you know, I don't see you in shul. When I look up in Muizenberg shul, and who do you think I see? I see the Rebbitzin. So, and the rabbi said to my mother, so who do you think you see? Who do you think Bertie sees from the box sitting there with his top hat? My mother answered, the Rebbitzin. So my mother was quite a tough lady, but also very humorous. In 1947, the King and Queen of England visited South Africa, and they visited Muizenberg. And my brother and I sat on the wall waving a Union Jack. That picture is actually Princess Elizabeth before she became queen in Simonstown. And if you look carefully on the left, my father was an honor guard. He's standing there. And that picture was taken at a rally. I'm not sure which rally, but she was giving a speech on her 21st birthday in Cape Town. They actually drove past our house on the beach road, and we waved furiously Union Jacks from the from the wall there. So that was something to remember. Then my parents gave sticking with my mother, my parents had their 60th wedding anniversary in the Talmatora Hall in Muizenberg, and they invited probably the whole of Muizenberg. I was there, and there is a picture of them walking out after their golden wedding. Now that's my grandparents. I'll come to them in a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. That's him on the right. That's my dad and mom at their golden wedding in Muizenberg. So now I'll come to the next one of service, and you can leave that other picture on the left up. That's my grandfather, or our grandfather, Max Sonnenberg and Lily Sonnenberg, who lived down the road from us in Muizenberg on Beach Road. And they did an enormous amount of service with the German Jews in South Africa, where my grandmother and my mother taught at Rose Court, which actually Rose Court in Cape Town was a donation by my grandfather to the community. The picture that you're seeing there is when they went to a ball in Simonstown, which the King and Queen had a ball in Simonstown. And so that was them. I used to see my grandmother and actually two grandmothers. One lived down the road from us in Muizenberg on Beach Road, opposite the pavilion. And we used to go in there on the way to school. And if our nails were clean, we'd get a piece of Wrigley's chewing gum, because that was during the war when you couldn't get chewing gum. And so the war records and the time of the war, I remember the announcements on the Duval Drive, for example, which had a big person with a finger in front of them, "Don't talk about ships and shipping." And I remember in the house, soldiers coming and putting up blackout curtains. I remember my mother sifting flour illegally in a sifter, because it was illegal to sift flour because it would be a waste of wheat or flour. I remember collecting silver paper for the war effort. But these were childhood memories, and only after the war we realized how severe the war could have been for South Africa. There was a move by the Afrikaans community, some of them, to actually side with Hitler. And luckily then they never did. So after the war, Smuts was let off from his amazing leadership of the United Party. And I remember meeting Smuts when I was a little boy, because he was a very good friend of my grandfather's who served in the United Party. So that's what I have to say about my memories, and in particular about people in my family who served the community. Those were really carefree days with the flay and the mountain and the beach and the scouts, and it was an amazing time. We lived in the golden era, and I don't think it'll ever be repeated again. So I'm going to stop there, but before I stop, I want to just say something in conclusion. Over the years, this synagogue has been a source of comfort, support, and inspiration for countless individuals and families. It's a place where we came together to pray, to learn, and to connect with one another. It's been a cornerstone of the community, and has played an integral role in shaping the identity of South African Jewry. I'd like to wish the synagogue and Rabbi a mazel tov on reaching 100 years, and wish you good luck and a wonderful future for Muizenberg and its community. Thank you for allowing me to talk. Thank you.
Well, Peter, I'm going to clap for everybody else who's on mute. That was a wonderful, wonderful trip down memory lane with so many interesting ideas and so many interesting, Jan Smuts and all these things. I never had an idea that I knew anybody who knew anybody who knew that person. Lastly, I'm just going to say that the Mass Theatre, I'm hoping that that's going to be a part of the centenary celebrations. I would like to have a comedy evening during that week at the Mass Theatre. I've already spoken to Celia Musicant about it, and we're in process of getting some comedians to come and launch the week ahead. So I guess your family will be involved at some level in the centenary celebrations, and I just wanted you to know that as well. I am going to go straight to Harry. I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to want to comment, but before I go to Harry, any family members of Peter, Richard, or anybody else who want to add one or two snippets before I go to the next speaker, just unmute yourself if you want to say anything. Otherwise, I'm going to just leave all the questions for the end. So if anyone wants to say anything, now's your chance. I'm going to give you a 3, 2, 1. Okay.
I'll say
Anybody.
a few
Richard,
words.
are you there? Okay, Richard's here.
I can say a few words.
Okay, I'm going to add a spotlight for you, Richard. Yes.
Hello,
What did you say, Peter?
I said hello.
Oh, happy. So basically, just I want to correct you, Ryan, not correct you, but give you some guidance. Celia Musicant for the Mass Theatre, they're not, the Muizenberg are not members anymore of the theatre as a repertory society. So I can send you the president's name or the chairman's name.
Please do.
So you can
Please
contact him. That's first of all. Peter, I often wondered where that silver mug was, okay? So, I guess you snooked it under me. But
That's okay.
Peter's recollections of Muizenberg, in some ways, very different to mine, because most of my summer holidays were spent on Dimmersfontein, which is a winery now, which was my grandfather's farm, which he bought many, many, many years ago, and became the family. And I studied agriculture at Elsenburg, Stellenbosch University, and Peter went into, I don't know what, metals and stones and rocks. But we grew up as twins, and I have very fond recollections of dressing up in little Navy or Air Force uniforms during the war. We've always remained very close, and Muizenberg has always been the catalyst of our friendship as brothers. So I could probably tell you a few stories which I'm not going to, because they might embarrass Peter, but I would remind him of the cigarette machine in London. When he arrived from London, I was living there, and he came across looking like an American, a check sports jacket, if I remember, or pants, and full of the stories of all these automats in the United States that you could put money in and things would come out. And we stopped at a machine on Regent Street, I believe it was, and he put his money in and he pulled the cigarette out and he let them go, and it took the cigarettes back and his money. So much for automation, okay? But I think I won't continue any longer, because I know that Harry Sachs from Harry, the best biltong in the world, okay?
Okay, so thank you, Richard, for that. It's great to see brothers, twins. I like the story about the bar mitzvah. And just once again, thank you to both of you, and also just generally to the Stern family for lifetimes of service. I think it was a very appropriate topic, and it was just wonderful to hear. So thank you so much. I'm now going to mute you. And I'm going to go to our next speaker, Harry. Harry, welcome. I'm going to make you the spotlight. And then at the end, anyone is welcome to speak or ask any questions to either speaker. Harry, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Ryan.
Thank you, Harry, for being here as well. And I know that you also, as Peter does above or before, has an amazing memory with so many details. Thankfully, I got the pleasure to meet both Peter and Harry a few times each before today. And I got the nitty-gritty, some of the things that are not going to be said on the internet. And I appreciate you both for that time as well, and just getting to meet you both. So Harry, we're going to do a little bit more of a discussion, and I'm going to be asking some questions which we've discussed, and just tell us whatever you feel that first comes to your mind. And of course, if you want to go on to the next topic, you're more than welcome. Let's start off from the beginning. How did the Sachs family arrive in Muizenberg?
My father comes from Lithuania, and he arrived here. He arrived in South Africa with his parents in 1927. He went to school until he was about 16 years old, and then he went out working. And the first position that he got was to work as a general worker in a butchery shop. And over the years, or over the time, he progressed from a worker to a tradesman, and eventually to a manager. And I'm trying to make it brief so I can get most of your questions in, because you gave me quite a lot of questions to answer. Anyhow, to cut a very long story short, he'd worked he was a manager in a butchery, and he met my mother there, who happened to be a bookkeeper in this particular butchery. And to cut another long story short, in 1938 they got married and they came to settle in Muizenberg.
So not everyone met in the snake pit. Some people met in the butcher.
Right. They came to settle in Muizenberg, and I was born in 1940. Shortly after they came to settle in Muizenberg, my dad decided to open a butchery business. He was a small fish amongst the big sea, because there were several shops in several butchery shops in Muizenberg, and he was just a small guy. And after he'd come there, just started before the war, and once the war started, he happened to get a quota, because meat, the sale of meat was very restricted, and you had to have a proper license before you could obtain one. Once you got that license, it became rather valuable, and after a couple of good years, approximately 1945 or so, he sold it, and he retired and went on a year's holiday, and we all went to the beach on many, many occasions. And after that year finished, they restarted again, and they opened a deli shop in a road called Clarendon Road. And I was about 4 or 5 years old, and it prospered from there. And from there, it was a very popular place between 1945 and 1947, and it was a restaurant, and it was not a restaurant, a takeaway and a grocery shop, and that prospered. And in 1950, they moved to a place in Atlantic Road, and my dad reopened the butchery shop in 1952. When I left school, I joined them in the business, and I enjoyed being in the meat trade, and I've been in it ever since, and I'm still in the meat trade. What's your next question, Ryan? And
so that was my next question, because I know that you could talk a lot about the butchery for a long time. but I don't think that needs to be spoken about. Could I see your lorries going through the city almost every day when I'm driving my children to school? I know that there was a lot of effort in making a small butchery that survived because of quotas in World War II to what you are today. You mentioned to me that you were doing at some point 18-hour work shifts in the summer with night swimming afterwards to keep you sane. Tell us a little bit about those days.
All right, we worked between 16 and 18 hours a day during the summertime, and very often my staff and myself would go home at about 7 o'clock in the evening, and we'd recommence at about 11:30 that night, preparing for the next day. And very often we'd go for we'd close the door and we'd go for a swim at the pavilion. Unfortunately, no one has mentioned what a beautiful, beautiful building that pavilion was. And during the summer months, it had floodlights into the sea. And having a swim at about 12 o'clock or 12:30 at night, coming back, we were refreshed and we'd continue doing our work there.
Beautiful story. I don't know if you knew that there were sharks in the ocean, Harry. Did that pass your mind?
At that point in time, the sharks were very, very, very rare in Muizenberg. It's only in the last several years that it's become, I can't say for what reason, but there's become a bigger shark population in Muizenberg.
Okay.
The ones in the sea, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next question. When we spoke, you were very proud about being, I think you called it a chorister, being in the chorus or in the choir for the shul. Can you tell us a little bit about specifics?
Sure.
Mention some names of people who were in the choir who you loved,
Sure.
and more specifically, which songs you loved singing.
I became a regular shul goer from the age of about 6 or 7. And I joined the choir when I was about 7 or 8. In those days, to join the choir, it was quite a privilege. You had to go to the chazan's house. The chazan at the time was a man by the name of Goldwasser. He lived in Alexander Road, and you had to be tested by the choir master, and that's where I started. And there were many young people young boys who were sopranos, and then there was basses and tenors, and we had a fantastic choir. And I remained in the choir for many, many years, always. And I've always been a sort of a choir boy or a choir man or something, and it stood me in good stead even today. And I really enjoy going to shul and participating in choirs, singing, etc., etc.
Great. Which was your favorite song to sing in the choir, Harry?
Oh, there were a lot of favorite songs. You can't be specific about. You can't be specific about them, but the very one that's always been one of my favorites is the song you sing when you return the Torah to the Oren Kodesh. That's one of my favorites, and I use it as a hallmark when I get an opportunity.
Beautiful, beautiful. I might hold you to that one day in Muizenberg.
Okay.
Let's go back to the late 1950s. You mentioned something called, is it called the Bob floor?
Oh, when I was about 17, when I was about 17, 18, in front of the pavilion, which unfortunately got demolished very, very prematurely. It should never have been demolished. It was a wonderful Victorian building, and that's an unfortunate part of Muizenberg that building ever had to be demolished. I'm sure with the technology that is available now, or even that it was available then, that building could definitely be saved. But be that as it may, in front of the building there was an open space which you could look down onto the Snake Park, as we call it, not as the Snake Pit, as Peter mentioned earlier. And they had a bop floor. A bop floor the easiest way to describe a bop floor is like the forerunner of the most of discos today. It was a floor that was raised about 1 foot off the ground, and it was made of wood, and it had a fence around, sort of a fence around it, and loudspeakers, and used to play records, and everybody used to dance, and it was really a very, very popular thing, and young people young and old used to dance and bop. Bop was the forerunner, the word bop, it was a type of dance. It was the forerunner to what we call rock and roll type of thing.
Yeah,
it was after jive, which was much earlier in the 1940s. Bop became the big deal, and then it developed into rock and roll.
And Harry, were you a good bopper?
I was a fair bopper.
Okay, great. Next, Vic Davis concerts.
Oh, Vic Davis concerts used to be held in this beautiful pavilion. It was a Sunday night feature during the summer season. There used to be an attendance of about 700 people, and it used to be very, very difficult to get in. And people used to start queuing on a Sunday afternoon to be able to buy tickets. Tickets were at that time 2 and 6pence, which is the equivalent of 25 cents in today's terms. And it was a variety concerts with many very different things, and it was unbelievable. And it used to go on for about 2 months of the year, and Vic Davis became a sort of a regular feature. And on Sunday mornings he used to perform at the beach, at the pavilion in Sea Point sometimes.
I wish they had that today. I really do. I wish they had Vic Davis concerts. Let's go to the next one. When you're talking about the pavilion, was that the same building that was demolished in the 1970s? Is that the one that you were referring to?
That must have been it. Unfortunately, when that painting that Peter so beautifully showed about his Atlantic Road, unfortunately, that's already with a new pavilion, which.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get that photo for you. I forget it. I'm going to leave it. Yeah, okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Anyhow, that's the new pavilion. It's a modern building, but it hasn't got the same type of character as the original building, which I think was also a baker, Thomas. I think it was called him Thomas Baker. I think his name was. I think it was designed by him. It had a lot of facilities, and it was unbelievably popular for many, many things. In fact, some of the great dramatic society, which Peter mentioned, the South Peninsula Dramatic Society, even well before the Mask Theatre, they used to do big shows in that pavilion, and really some fantastic big productions.
Beautiful. Let's go to something a little bit more juicy. Watermelon feasts on the beach, fruit sellers who could speak Yiddish. Tell us a little bit about the fruit cakes, fruit stores, fruit this. Even though you're a butcher, you're allowed to get vitamin C. Tell us about it.
Absolutely, on a daily basis. No, there was fruit selling was a big thing on the beach, and there were a couple of fruit sellers who could speak a little bit of Yiddish, and I just thought I'd mention it to you when we had the interview, and it was very interesting to hear what they would come with, and they would know you by name, and you would know them by name, and they used to get around.
And were you able to speak Yiddish? Were the children in your generation were able to speak Yiddish to these Yiddish speakers?
Well, yes, the best as we could, but not as good as my father could speak Yiddish. The later generations picked it up. I picked it up, but not to the same extent as what my father and my grandparents could speak it.
Yeah, well, that's better than what we are today. We just all of us today in my generation, just a bunch of schmucks anyway. That's the only one that came through. Okay, next thing, publicity association.
Oh,
What exactly is that?
Yeah, I must tell you about that. In about the middle 60s, there was a gentleman by the name of Ivan Sachs, no relation of mine, and there was a gentleman by the name of Harold Danker, and with a couple of businessmen, including myself, they started and including several hoteliers, they started a thing called Hospitality Holidays. It used to usually be in the middle of March and to the middle of April. They used to bring down to Muizenberg a couple of hundred people, could be about 200 at least, maybe a touch more. And the hotels used to give them a special rate for approximately 10 or 14 days. And these people were sort of chaperoned and had a beautiful holiday. People of ages probably younger than I am today, but and everything, it used to be very lively, and a lot of people contributed to it, and there was lots of entertainment for them, and they used to go, or buses were taken and giving them drives and all sorts of lovely things for these people.
Okay. I want to go to the comment section quickly.
The
just
what
to
one?
say,
Sorry.
I'm just going to go to the chat section. You don't have to do anything, but I want to just tell you, because I'm going to ask you about Kol HaNoar in a second, which you mentioned once. I got a few things. Gerald Seftel said, this is based on Peter's talk, who mentioned something about youth movements as well. Gerald Seftel said, we had a Jewish youth movement called Kol HaNoar, led by Nathan Frank, son of Reverend Frank. Linda Mindy commented, and there was Beitar, led by the Lazarus Boys. Hetty David said something about Peter's speech. Full story of the meeting between Tilly Stern and the rabbi can be found in her book on page 160. Herbert Baker, by the way, was the architect, not Thomas Baker. Herbert Baker, I believe,
Herbert
was his
Baker,
name.
yeah, that's
and
right.
just on that note, Herbert Baker, Harry, this is just for you and Peter and everybody else to appreciate. I got a call about 2 years ago from the Muizenberg Historical Society, who wanted to give a plaque to important contributions to the general Muizenberg history. The first plaque that they put up was at the site of Agatha Christie's house. That was the first plaque that was put. The second plaque was put on our synagogue. That was the second one that they decided to put a plaque up at. And the third one was at Herbert Baker's house, which I think, or one of his houses, or maybe one of his houses that he did the architecture for, I'm not sure, but it was right close to Peter and Richard's house on that road, just a few houses up. So I just wanted to catch everyone up with that. But coming back to you, Harry, Kol HaNoar, tell us a little bit about your youth and your movements, and maybe a little bit about Peter, who I believe was one of your counselors.
Sure. I think Peter was my patrol leader at one time, could have been that, and I remember him very well. In fact, if he didn't remind us all about his late father's name, I was going to tell you that, and I thought I would have surprised him, but we all knew him as Sandpiper, and he was a very, very, very well-loved man, and it was really a fantastic tribute that Peter did to his parents, and particularly his father. Kol hakavod to you, Peter. Right, where are we now? All right. There was a Nathan Frank, who I saw Gerald Seftel mentioning. Nathan Frank was the son of Reverend Frank, and he was a great guy. And between him and a guy by the name of Alec Rifkin, who was a scouter as well, around about 1949 or 1950, started a Kol HaNoar at the Talmud Torah Hall in Wary Road. It was definitely, it wasn't Beitar, but it had the same ethic as Beitar, and that was the and it was sort of styled like a scout troop to a certain extent. And there were patrols, and for example, some of the patrol names were like Trumpeldor, Bialik, a couple of others which I just can't remember. And we had a basic uniform, and we used to meet, not in competition. I was a scout for many, many years. We used to meet as well, and it was there was a lot of interest, and we had a great time with
Harry,
Alec
Harry,
Rifkin.
Baden Powell. What's Baden Powell to you?
Baden Powell was the founder of the Scout movement in England. And everything in fact, in Muizenberg, the drive between Muizenberg and the N2 is named after him, Baden Powell.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I didn't put the two together because I know the road, and I just saw it on my page, Baden Powell. So now at least I know whose road I'm driving on. Harry, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much I know in your mind and in your head of so many details. We went onto the Publicity Association. We went onto the Snakefoot, the fruit sellers, the Kol HaNoar, the swimming at Floodlit, the Vic Davises, the Bob Floors, the prayer, the shul, the choirs. Last thing you mentioned to me, just now that I'm thinking about, because I'm just interested in it. I think you mentioned to me that one of the rabbi's children got lost on the mountain. Was there some story like that?
Sure. The same Nathan Frank, who was the Kol HaNoar originator when he was young. I must have been approximately about 10 or 11 years old. So this is stories that I heard from my parents, or what happened at the time. Somehow he got lost on Muizenberg Mountain for a day or 2 days or 3 days, and people searched for him and found him eventually. And he got injured, and he got injured around about on his shoulder or his neck. But he made a recovery, but he remained with a sort of affliction on his neck. But he was a wonderful, wonderful guy, and really a fantastic guy. And his nickname was Prof. They all called him Prof. And he was
Harry, I can see there's some people. I can see there's sorry.
He was Reverend Frank's youngest son. Sorry, go for it.
So I was just saying, I see some people nodding their heads as you're speaking. I'm looking at Linda Pachter and others who I think are relatives, maybe, of the person you're talking about. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so.
Could be.
I thought that that's an interesting one, because it's not that often that someone gets lost in a mountain, never mind a rabbi's son, which, you know, I hope my son never does. But sometimes I feel like I want to take him up that mountain, and maybe one day I will when he's a little bit bigger. Pete and Harry, I want to thank you so much for just so much memories, and I'm smiling inside. I know that a lot of other people will as well. I'm going to open it up now to any questions or comments. You're just going to have to unmute yourselves and just say, maybe just say your name, and then we can just see if there's any suggestions or comments or questions, and then we'll wrap up. Linda, I'll start off with you. Linda, was the person that that Harry was talking about, is that a relative of yours?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Nathan was, my father was Izzy Frank. I'm Izzy Frank's youngest daughter. I live in Israel. Nathan was his youngest brother, and the story that I remember, that he fell down the Muizenberg mountain, and I think he actually hit his head because people said he was quite simple afterwards. And
he was far from simple.
Yeah, he was actually an accountant, but and he worked for his older brother, Solly, my father's older brother, Solly Frank. He used to walk around with peppermints and give out peppermints to all the people. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but he never ever married. He was always very simple, and yes, as Harry said, they used to call him the Prof. I still remember him as a young kid. I remember my Uncle Nathan very well. Yeah.
Thank you.
He was a great guy. He was a great guy.
Thank you. Anyone else want to say
I wouldn't have called him simple. With the greatest respect to the remark you made, he was very far from simple. He was
Okay.
a great guy.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks from Israel. Anyone else want to say anything? Just unmute yourself so I know that you want to say something. Anyone else? You don't have to.
Sure.
We can wrap it up. If you need to. Okay, Leslie. Hi,
how's it?
Leslie.
Yeah, how's it? I'm
How's
actually
it?
in the car. No, I just
Go
want to
for
say
it, no
shkaf to
problem.
my dad. And even though like you're doing like old stuff with old memories, I lived in Muizenberg for 9 years, and even like the memories are not my memories, but it's almost like those memories get passed down in the generation, and you feel it. And my dad talks about the snake park, which I never knew, but it's like it becomes, for those of us who are like that next generation, it becomes part of your history, part of your own life. And growing up in Muizenberg was the best 9 years of my life, and Muizenberg Shul was like the biggest jewel. And my dad and my brother, his second bar mitzvah, not there, but still. And shkach, Dad.
Well done, Harry. Thank you, Leslie, for that. And of course, you should be very proud of your dad, which I know that you are.
And we all are.
That's true. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else want to say any comments before we wrap up? No, there's a lot of there's some speakers who's speaking. Sorry.
I wanted to say this is Derek Berghaus. Harry.
Hi, Derek.
Family,
Derek from
San Diego.
Yes, great. How's it, Derek?
I live near the airport, so the planes are taking off. Sorry about that.
We can hear you.
All right. Harry, good to see you. Fun memories of Muizenberg. Great to see the family and also a couple of other people I recognize the names. Peter Stern, I think I remember your mom. And I grew up in Muizenberg until 1975. I think we left to go live in Clifton. Muizenberg was an amazing place, and I will cherish the days of growing up there, riding my bicycle along the Flay, renting canoes from the wolves, fishing off the bridge, going to the beach, getting buried by the Malmeds in the sand. It was a fantastic childhood. I wouldn't change it for the world. Also, my grandfather was also instrumental in establishing the shul in 1948. And I think that they something to do with they put him in some book in Israel as one of the founders of the shul. I don't know, Harry, you might know more information about
if I chirp in, Derek, it's good to see you there. And in case you can't remember, our maternal grandfathers were actually brothers. And your grandfather also was Nathan Trackman. He presented the chandeliers that are in the shul even till today. That's a little anecdote.
Okay, that's great info. I actually also recently, in the last couple of years, put a plaque in memory of Jack and Esme in the Muizenberg shul, which I thought was something that I should do, seeing that the grandfather was instrumental in getting the shul together. So I honor them in the shul, and I hope to actually get there sometime in the next couple of years. I had my bar mitzvah there, which was, somebody reminded me it was 50 years ago, which is quite a long time ago. But yeah, Muizenberg, what an amazing place to grow up with everything there. It was just a fantastic memory. And I'm still friendly with some people that I'll mention, the Weisenbergs from Cork Bay, David Sachs from up on the mountain, and Clifford Reichland, the Dickmans, Cheryl Ratkin. Unfortunately, Trevor, the brother, passed away in the last few months. But Zelda is still in Sea Point. I don't know, Harry, you might know. We'll see her.
She just had a birthday on Shabbos that went past, but it was one of those birthdays when you don't really know her age. You can only estimate it. It's pretty old.
Yeah, she's still around, and Cheryl is living in Europe, and I still keep in contact with the Dickmans, Phyllis and Frank, and Jocelyn and Maxine and Rolene. I'm just trying to see David Kay in London. I still keep in contact with him once in a while. We had just a great time, and those friends are lost forever from our childhood growing up in Muizenberg. And Harry, I remember I loved to go to your mom's stall, and my mom used to tell me I could just walk down the aisle, but I can't take too many chocolates. But I used to take some, and then we used to get the side of beef from you guys from the butcher, and we used to have the fridge packed with a side of beef, and you guys used to cut up everything and package everything in like the dinners for the family every night. So we just take a pack of the meat out every night and make dinner. And then when I wasn't happy with what we were eating, I would just go to the fridge and grab a steak or something like that. But I cherish those days, and I hope to see you guys in person in the next couple of years.
Well, Derek, December's a reunion. Please come if you can.
When is that?
I said
When is
that's
the reunion?
December's the reunion. That's going to be the centenary reunion. If you can, you're invited.
If I can make it, I will be there.
Good, thanks, Derek. Thank you for those comments. And Derek, it's always good to see another San Diegan. I've lived there myself. We know a lot of common peoples, and it must be early for you. So thanks, Derek, for being there just before flights. I'll maybe let one or two more people comment, and then I'm going to end off with maybe just a last word from either Peter or Harry just to say goodbye. Does anyone want to say one last thing? Alison, I see Alison from London, or from England rather, wants to say something.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's nice to see the faces. Just Harry mentioned the fruit sellers on the beach that spoke Yiddish, and the most famous and beloved one was Gunnar. Was Gunnar, and I mean he could speak Yiddish probably better than all the other Yiddish speaking people. So that's just my little 2 bits.
Okay, I hope Gunnar was just a slur, not who he was. It's a funny name.
No, it was.
Is it?
It was 50-50. But they all knew him, and they all knew that he would take a chance, and they loved him for it.
Okay.
Alison, is your dad was your dad Alec?
Alec Weiss. Alec
was
and Esther Weiss.
Okay.
And more people that have is Barney and Leonie Fisher that used to have a restaurant there, and our rye bread and the beef and rye bread sandwiches that we used to buy there. Yeah,
Good to see you.
Lovely memory, yes. And I used to come to your butcher and the delicatessen. Lots of memories.
Good to see you.
Okay, everyone, keep well, stay well.
Thank you, Alison. So I think unless anyone else wants to say something, I think we'll close off. Oh yeah, I think is that you, Colin?
Mervyn.
Okay, I'm going to go Colin, and I think Mervyn, you're next. Go, Colin.
Yeah.
Hello,
right.
Mervyn.
Can you hear me, Ryan? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm in Vegas. It's -9 hours. And you can see it says Claire, which is my sister-in-law, also from Muizenberg. So just a quick one. Please, everybody who's on this webinar, give Ryan your email addresses. Derek, you've mentioned a lot of people there. We'd love everybody to be in Cape Town in December. So if you can all just give Ryan email address, any contacts, that's the thing. If you've got a list of 10 ex-Muizenbergers, give Ryan the 10 ex-Muizenbergers. We all have friends.
I'm actually going to put on the chat the email address to email any new it's muizenberg.schul@gmail.com. Fair enough. Okay, I'm not going to tell people how to spell Muizenberg, but it's Muizenberg point or period or full stop schul, muizenberg.schul@gmail.com. I'll send that to everybody. And Colin, have a safe time in Vegas and enjoy. And thank you for being here. And I'm going to go to Mervyn. Mervyn, I think you wanted to say something as well. I'll let you say the last point, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes. What I want to tell you is that Gunneth, the name that was actually given to him was Leipke the Gunneth. Now, his real name was Sydney, and Leipke grew up his mother was a domestic at a house in Wherry Road, and he grew up speaking Yiddish before he spoke English or Afrikaans. But I'll tell you more about him at a later stage.
Okay, great.
Good to see you,
Great.
Mervyn.
Harry,
You guys know each other?
Mervyn is my classmate. Mervyn and I went to
Yes.
school together.
Who-
Hey, Mervyn.
Batya sat in front of me, and I used to pinch the sweets out of her pocket.
Nonsense, you steal my lunch.
Your lunch.
That's
Which
right.
who's that?
yes.
I got-
Yeah, you see, there were
Brenda.
other Gunnifs in town as well, it seems, Mervyn, not just later.
And Peter was my Arkela. We'll do our best. We'll do our duty to God, our Queen, and our country.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
You used to say, we'll dib, we'll dog,
We'll
dog,
dab,
dog.
dab, dab, woof.
Do your best and do our best. That's
Yes.
what it stood for. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely.
They
Okay.
were marvelous days. They were marvelous days.
Yeah, absolutely. The best days, the best golden years of South Africa. Yep. Harry, it
Absolutely.
was
Well,
great.
Peter and Harry, I'll let you maybe end off with one closing statement if you wish. Peter and then Harry.
My only closing statement is that I enjoyed talking to whoever was listening. And Harry, it was great to hear your speech. I learned a lot from you. In fact, about the Vic Davis concerts, I was one of the people in the queue of 700. Loved them. Yeah.
It was
Anyway,
fantastic.
great to see you
Fantastic.
again. If you come
Good
to
to see you.
Israel, please look me up. I'd really like that. And
Good to see you.
as far as the centenary is concerned, with a bit of luck, we'll try and make it. Yeah.
Peter, that would be lovely.
Peter,
And
bring your
all in good
sister.
health.
Peter, bring your sister, Jean, who was in my class.
Yes.
Peter,
Yes, Jean.
Jean, tell her to come as well. I'd love to see her again.
I will tell her. That's Batya. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I will tell
You'll
her.
know me as Brenda.
I'm sorry.
You will know me as Brenda. I was Brenda Resnick.
Okay.
Well, Batya, it's good to see you. I know that you'll be coming end of year, so I'm not gonna say
Absolutely.
goodbye to you. And I know that there's already people coming in from Europe and America and Israel. So hopefully we'll have a great crowd. And Harry, do you want to close us off with any statement?
Well, I'd like to thank you for having me. And it was a great listening to Peter. And it's just good to be with everybody that comes from Muizenberg. And Muizenberg is a great place, and it's the greatest place, and I'll never forget it. Even though I've been out of Muizenberg or not living in Muizenberg for well over 30 years, it's still a great place. And I still, if anyone asks me where I come from, it's always from Muizenberg, even though haven't been living there for 30 years. Good to see you all, and I wish you well, Rabbi. And
Thank you,
I
Harry.
hope you'll be very successful in keeping together what you've tried to put together in Muizenberg.
Thank you, Harry. Well, I'm just continuing a legacy of many, many people before me, and that's where you guys feature, and that's where your parents and maybe grandparents feature. And let's continue the blessing of Muizenberg. God sending love from Muizenberg to wherever you are, in good health and happiness, and hope to see you next week, Wednesday, 4 o'clock South African time. Different speakers, interesting speakers, new ideas, new things. So I look forward to that. Thank you again, Peter. Thank you, Harry. God bless.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.